Hi, everybody. Whether you have just started to earn, or you are starting your investment journey, or even if you have started your investments and you are still having a very little or no knowledge about the emergency fund, this is the session that is relevant to you. See, I'll just take you to a brief background of what emergency funds are, why they are required, when they can be required, why they can be used, for what those things can be used, everything. So now let's just go back 2 or 3 years and see the scenario of the COVIDs and the lockdowns, the impact of this pandemic that we had on the resulting lockdowns. And I mean, no person on this world was left untouched. We saw businesses getting their revenues cut down. We saw the businesses downsizing. We saw the businesses shutting down. And in fact, not just the businesses, even the whole economies and the governments came to a standstill. अभी ऐसे सिचुएशन में when there is no revenue, when there is no business to be done, एक डाउनसाइजिंग करने में या फिर एम्प्लॉयज को ले ऑफ करना पड़ता है बिजनेस को, बिकॉज दे वांट टू स्टे अफ्लोट. दे कांट कीप इनकरिंग दोज फिक्स्ड कॉस्ट एंड देन स्टिल होप कि मतलब कि कुछ ना कुछ मिरेकल हो जाएगा और हम लोग आगे बढ़ जाएंगे. सो दे हैड टू कट डाउन, दे हैड टू ले ऑफ. ऐसे सिचुएशन में ऑन अ पर्सनल लेवल हमारी क्या हालत होती है? Because when you or me, we are working, we are having a job, we have spent a lot of time in that company, building that company, and then suddenly you get an email that you are no longer a part of it. It is not just heartbreaking, but it is something that gives you tension. कि इसके आगे हम लोग क्या करेंगे? What do we do? How do we manage our finances? Who will take us for another job in a time when there was no business to do? And on top of it, all the businesses were also struggling to get payments. See, normally business ka cycle kaise work hota hai, that you give your goods or services, and based on the goods and services, basically एक credit period मिलता है, 30 days, 45 days, 15 days, 60 days, 90 days. Okay, after such a credit period, we'll make the payment. Now, what happened that in case of COVID, ये पूरा cycle अटक गया because people who had the cash did not want to part ways with it. Because उनको मालूम था कि जब तक cash इनके पास पड़ा है, तब तक उनको कोई problem नहीं होने वाला है. The moment they start paying off their creditors, और उनको अगर पैसा सामने से नहीं आया, तो उनका भी बिजनेस वैसे ही स्टैंड स्टिल में आ जाएगा, उनको भी शायद डाउनसाइज करना पड़ेगा, उनको भी शायद शट डाउन करना पड़ेगा. दैट इज द रीजन पीपल वर होल्डिंग ऑन टू द कैश सो मच. एंड ऑन टॉप ऑफ इट, on a personal level, the COVID just did not bring that threat of this illness happening to you, but people also faced a lot of other illnesses. थोड़ा कोई दूसरा physical illness हो गया, किसी को mental illness हो गया, which was because of being crammed up in one single place for so long. But then, of course, government also did not have much to do at that point. And at the same time, we also saw कि कितनी सारी items ऐसी थी जिसका price बढ़ गया just because the supply was not adequate. Now, in such a situation, what would you rather prefer? That you have some money on the side, or you just keep on earning and spending without saving anything? So basically, in such a scenario, when you have planned things better, you will have a better chance of survival as compared to a person who is not planning. So here, the biggest thing that people missed out when people had to spread their hands in front of others, कि मेरे पास पैसा नहीं है, मेरे को घर वाले को खिलाने के लिए पैसा नहीं है. In that such a dreadful situation, what was actually happening is कि सबके पास liquidity कम हो गया था. Now that liquidity is essentially how much money you have, so that easily you can have things accessible to you. It is the ease at which you can buy or sell something without really affecting its value. That is what liquidity is. For example, if your laptop suddenly is not working and you have to buy a new laptop, then let's say it costs you around 1 lakh rupees. And if you have 1 lakh in your bank, you can easily buy it, no problems at all. But instead of that bank balance, if you had 1 lakh in rare coin collection, तो ये same laptop लेना कितना difficult हो जाता था. Because rare coin collection is something which is not considered as a liquid asset class. तो उस टाइम पे जब भी आपको लेना है कुछ, जब भी आपको अर्जेंटली कुछ किसी को पेमेंट करना है, कोई मेडिकल बिल्स रहेगा जो अर्जेंटली आपको देना है, उस टाइम पे you always have to have liquidity. Otherwise, you will either have to take a loan on a very high interest rate, or you will just go bust, or maybe you will have to sacrifice a lot of things. And basically, the whole session is planned in such a way that after this session, and if you are planning and if you are disciplined enough, you don't have to see that day where you have to sacrifice something just because you did not have money in the pocket. So basically, if you have attended our previous sessions, we were repeatedly talking about a person who had several properties. They had no property on rent. Abhi, just consider in a situation like COVID when everything was not working for 3 months, 4 months, and 6 months. ऐसे ऐसे पर्सन का क्या हालत होगा जिसके पास प्रॉपर्टीज बहुत सारा है, सो नेटवर्थ इज ब्रिलियंट बट देयर इज नो लिक्विडिटी. Would you call this person wealthy? Will he still be called wealthy if he doesn't have money to cover for his day-to-day expenses? And what good are these properties for if they are not being held? I mean, if they are not working in the need of the hour. So basically, now you must have heard cash is king. So now we'll see that king into play. Exactly, cash कैसे king है. So basically क्या होता है कि when you talk about a government, maybe you talk about any economy, you talk about a business, an industry, or even at a personal level. There are a lot of assets which are illiquid. In case of a business, let's say there is a machinery. In case of person, it is a real estate. So in case of government, it's an infrastructure. These are all illiquid assets, but it is something that definitely has some value for you. And then there are liquid assets like cash hai, bank balance hai. These are all liquid assets. So usually when these businesses, when they go bust, when do they become bankrupt is when this liquid asset of theirs is in the negative. That means जो उनको पे करने का obligations है आज के दिन में, that is way more than what they have in their pocket. That is the reason businesses go bankrupt. And uska trickle down effect ऐसा है कि because now you have gone bankrupt, the value of all the illiquid assets also that you own automatically starts coming down. Either it is because of a bad sentiment, or it is because of a bad business goodwill, or it is because of some other factor. But eventually, what you get out of those assets is lesser than what you should get ideally. So when it comes to finance, it is not really difficult, or sorry, not very different for any individual, for any family, or a business, or a government, or any such entity. Everybody has to have a liquid asset which is used for the day-to-day expenses. Now, the biggest misconception that people have in their mind is that if you have a lot of investments in the assets, that means you are wealthy. But it is not the case, because like I explained you compulsorily have to have liquid assets along with the illiquid assets that you have. Because only when you have these two things in a good proportion, that is the time you will be called wealthy or even be considered wealthy. Now, एक traditional Indian savings का अगर बात करें, so in a traditional Indian savings culture कैसा था जो which was followed by our forefathers, our grandfathers, great grandfathers, great grandmothers. Very simple, एक real estate लिया जो खुद का घर रहेगा. They wanted their own house because they did not want that obligation to go on a rent, move again. And तभी regulations भी इतने ज़्यादा strict नहीं थे जो अभी है. So ideally, they always preferred to have their own house, because having a house means there is a guarantee of the next 25, 30, 40 years that they don't have to move from there. So one biggest achievement of life was getting into a real estate. तो एक बार अगर वो रियल एस्टेट ले लिया, वो अगर सॉर्ट कर दिया, that the family is secure, उसके बाद जब भी फैमिली का needs बढ़ेगा, if you want a bigger real estate, you can obviously sell this real estate and move to a bigger one. But till then, at least for the next 20, 25, 30 years, one generation is sorted with that real estate. The second thing that they used to invest was gold. Gold mein, our ancestors always used to prefer gold because gold was always seen as something which was carrying a big hedge against a lot of things. Like for example, if you see today also, today you must be knowing that gold का भाव इतना बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ गया है. Now, why this has happened is because there are uncertainties in the global scenario, sorry, which is causing the world to not function in a very easy manner, in a very routine manner. So जब भी इस type का uncertainty आता है, this is the time when your precious metals like gold and silver start running. Maybe you did not see a very big rally so far, talking about last 12, 13, 15 years. But suddenly when the uncertainty starts, suddenly the gold value increases. And that is always a cover. So जब भी आपको शादी में when you have a lot of gold coming in or going out of your house, that is because gold was always considered something to have value. And it was a store of value, and it was something that used to increase with time. The value used to increase with time. That is why they always preferred gold. And the third was that after real estate and gold, अगर कुछ उनके पास बच गया है, extra money, they used to put it into fixed deposits. The interest rate that you used to get on fixed deposits was somewhere around 12, 13, 14, 16% also at one point. So it used to be a really attractive asset class at that point. और इससे ज़्यादा चाहिए भी नहीं था. Right now we have so many different aspirations as to what kind of cars we want, what kind of bikes we want, or what kind of travel we want to do. उस time पे इतना ज़्यादा aspirations भी नहीं थे. So keeping in mind those aspirations, these three things, real estate, gold, and your fixed deposit, used to be more than enough. Now, all basically what happened was कि ये तीनों चीज, or rather these two things, gold and fixed deposits, it gave them a good mix of illiquid asset in real estate and a liquid asset in gold and fixed deposits. And this basically was a concept of emergency funds for them. So it's not a very new concept. It's a very age-old traditional concept. It is just that we've given this a very fancy name of emergency funds, but ये सालों से होते आ रहा है. Moreover, apart from the real estate, gold and fixed deposits, we had Indian housewives who were just like James Bond, financial equivalent of a James Bond. James Bond का क्या है? He normally any spy, it has to be so discreet, so much undercover that nobody even knows that he's a spy. But not James Bond. Everybody knows that James Bond is a spy, and he's still celebrated as the best. Same चीज है इंडियन हाउसवाइफ्स का. जब भी वो लोग का खुद का एक सेविंग्स का हैबिट था, out of the money that they used to get for running the houses. So what they used to do is they used to try to cut any kind of expenses that are avoidable. उसमें से वो थोड़ा बहुत सेविंग्स करते थे. Everybody knew in their house कि कुछ ना कुछ ऐसा hidden savings होते जा रहे हैं. But still everybody used to respect it. Still everybody used to turn a blind eye on it. उसको अंडरकवर ही रखते थे कि वो जितना हो रहा है होने दो. It is better that I don't know because वो कभी ना कभी काम आ जाएगा. And by chance अगर काम नहीं आया तो eventually it is going to go to our sons and daughters, and again they'll be happy. So that is the reason they also used to keep this. In fact, in my own circle, I've seen a family who went bankrupt because of an income tax rate that they got in their houses. And the wife used to have this kind of a practice of saving that hidden money. Because of that hidden money, there was no track of it. There was nothing that even the officers could find. But after the officers left, after everything was taken away from them, this hidden money became a corpus for them to restart. And that changed their fortunes. अगर ये उनके पास नहीं होता, probably they still would have been somewhere in a very remote place, maybe shifted to their village and I don't know where. But because they had this kind of a hidden money, this kind of a fund that they have, that they never used it, that helped them in the time when they actually needed it the most. So coming back to our emergency fund example. So emergency fund is basically a cash reserve that is specifically set aside for any unplanned expenses or any emergency expenses. The purpose of emergency fund is to improve your financial security by giving you a safety net that can be used for any kind of unanticipated expenses. Emergency savings जो भी रहेगा, कोई unplanned bills रहेगा, that are not a part of your routine, that is basically what forms a part of an emergency fund. So emergency fund can be a small expense or a large expense, but it should not be something that is used in your routine, basically. So you might face something like medical expense, maybe house repairs, maybe unplanned travel because somebody from your relatives is ill, some job loss, some change in career path because you are just not able to take it anymore. Or maybe even if you want to help a friend out of their emergency. ये सारे चीजों के लिए you can use your emergency funds. But again, the need for the emergency funds will vary according to your family. आपके फैमिली का क्या डिफरेंट रेट्स है उसके बेसिस पे होगा. बट गिविंग यू अ थंब रूल, इट इज 6 months ऑफ एक्सपेंसेस, 6 months ऑफ योर एवरेज एक्सपेंसेस जो आपका इमरजेंसी फंड्स में साइड में होना चाहिए. Now, the first thing that you do before building your emergency fund is note down your expenses. See, as a family, I'm saying as a family, see as a family, all the expenses that you do throughout your month and divide it into a fixed expense and a variable expense. Normally, fixed expense will be something like your rent, your EMI, your insurance, which falls into a category of fixed. That means कि अगर आप एक महीने के लिए वेकेशन पे भी चले गए, फिर भी आपको ये सारा पैसा देना है, because this is a fixed expense that you have to do because you have taken a right to use that asset. तो ये आपको करना ही है. On the other hand, variable expenses can mean a grocery or a medical bill, some entertainment expenses, your petrols, your lifestyle expenses. ये सारी चीज है, वो सब एक variable expenses है. Now, for example, if you're a family of 5 and have a monthly average expense of around 25,000 variable expenses, तो उसमें आपका घर ठीक ठाक चल रहा है. But let's say for a month you have some relatives coming at your place, and now instead of 5, you are 8 people living in that same home. So now you have to feed 8 mouths. So because you have more number of people living in your house, your variable expenses increased, but your fixed expenses remain the same. So by dividing into these two categories, what you basically can do is कि आपका fixed cost जो है, try to spread it out for a longer term, so that आज का आपका outflow है वो कम होते जाए. And at the same time, in the variable expenses, in your lifestyle expenses, see something which is avoidable. बहुत ज़्यादा फिजूल हो रहा है, but you never noticed. Maybe आपने Zomato से बहुत ज़्यादा ऑर्डर कर दिया है, just because it is easily accessible. Amazon से इतना कुछ आ गया है कि उसका जरूरत ही नहीं है, रखने का भी जगह नहीं है. But just because of habit, just because of that feel-good factor, you keep on buying stuff. So all those expenses which are avoidable, which are excess, those can be avoided. एंड एक बार आपको ये पता चल गया ना कि ये सारे एक्सपेंसेस ऐसे हैं जो अवॉइडेबल है, जो बस फिजूल में हो रहे हैं, ऑटोमेटिकली योर एवरेज मंथली एक्सपेंसेस कम डाउन, एंड नॉट ओनली डू योर सेविंग्स इंक्रीज, आपका ये जो टारगेट है एक इमरजेंसी फंड क्रिएट करने का, दैट ऑल्सो बिकम्स ईजी. On an ideal case, if your total expense, your fixed expense plus your variable expense, ये दोनों मिला के let's say it's 60,000 rupees a month on an average. So multiplying it by 6 months, your total emergency fund has to be 3,60,000 rupees. अगर आपके पास ये emergency fund आपके पास ready है, it is just going to give you a sense of security, because कोई भी eventuality आ गया, something which is out of your hand, something which is an emergency, something that was not planned, you can dip into this bucket, take out some money for that particular time, and then fill it when you're again good to go. So by doing this exercise, what you can always try to do is try cutting down your expenses, try to see what you like, what you love to do, what expenses you really want to want to happen, and at the same, based on that you decide कि आपका monthly average expenses कितना आ रहा है. Now, how important is setting this emergency fund? It is that important that it should have been done yesterday. As a fact, 75% of the Indians are not having emergency funds with them. उनको ये concept पता ही नहीं है या फिर वो कर नहीं रहे, and this 75% usually consists of all the millennials and all the Y generation and Z generation people. जो पुराने लोग थे, जो उनको पहले से आदत थी, वो लोग ने ऐसा इनहेरिट किया हुआ था वो हैबिट्स, वो लोग ने तो काफी कुछ किया हुआ है. But 75% of the new generation people are not doing this, which is a very, very alarming figure. And the whole target of this kind of session is to turn that 75,000 to a positive side. So as an individual or as a family, you might have a lot of aspirations, targets, dreams to fulfill. And to fulfill them, you have to divide your savings into a lot of buckets. Holiday पे जाना है उसका एक bucket, शादी करना है उसका एक bucket, car लेना है उसका एक bucket. So out of all these buckets, you have to keep on saving and keep on putting in a little bit of money every month so that धीरे धीरे whenever this bucket gets filled, you can use that for your expenses and you don't really have to bother about कि आपका day to day का क्या होगा. Exactly the same principle is work for the emergency fund, but this emergency fund has to be on priority above your aspirations, above your targets, above your dreams to fulfill. Because emergency fund अगर आपने एक बार if this is taken care of earlier on, तो बाकी का सब चीज automatically easy हो जाएगा. And just consider that if you are giving equal weightage to emergency funds, to your other car, buying a car, buying a house, wedding expenses, अगर आप सबको equal weights दे रहे हैं और आपने सोचा कि अगर मेरे पास 40,000 है तो ये 4 buckets है मेरे पास, मैं 10-10 हजार सब में डाल रहा हूँ. Now let's say, God forbid, if you get some emergency in your house, some medical emergency, and you have to dip into all these buckets, तो आपको 10,000 rupees per month का emergency fund might not be very relevant, might not be enough for you. तो eventually क्या करना होगा कि आपको you'll have to dip into your car bucket, you'll have to dip into your marriage bucket, your house bucket, and eventually उसमें से आपको expenses cover करना होगा. This might not be such a big deal for now, but when you actually try to do it, because we have clients who have faced this, and eventually they have faced such a big mental trauma because of it, कि उनका जो एस्पिरेशनल कार था, जो ड्रीम कार था, उसके लिए जब भी उनको वापस चालू करना था सेविंग, दे वर हेजिटेंट टू डू इट, दे वर जस्ट नॉट कॉन्फिडेंट कि वापस मैं स्टार्ट करूंगी तो वापस कुछ ना कुछ हो जाएगा, वापस मेरे को इसमें से निकालना पड़ेगा, एंड अगेन माय टारगेट विल बी डिलेड. So rather than getting into such a big mental torture, if you can really switch everything to emergency funds and make it stronger before you dip into anything else, any kind of medium-term targets, any kind of long-term targets, even there might be some short-term targets which are avoidable. अभी के लिए कि बाद में कर लेंगे. So go for emergency funds first, secure them as much as you can, and then go ahead. Now again, having said that, 6 months का emergency fund is a thumb rule. That does not mean कि 6 महीने का ही आपको चाहिए. Based on your family situation, it could go up to 8 months, it could even go up to 1 year. But you have to decide on how much you want it. Now, another important factor here is how soon you require this emergency fund to be. Now, if you go by mathematical equation, it ideally has to be as soon as possible, but generally between 12 to 18 months. But because this 12 to 18 months can seem a long time based on situation to situation, you have to prioritize emergency funds even by cutting down your daily expenses for the moment. Just till the time emergency funds आपका set होता है, उसके बाद आपको जरूरत नहीं है. But there can be some situations like aging parents, उनका कुछ medical expenses आ सकता है, you know that. There's a pregnancy in the house, कुछ house का leakages चालू है, कोई आपका equipment से मतलब TV, fridge, AC, something that has to be replaced, your old car or old bike to be replaced, या कोई event कोई आने वाला है 1 साल के अंदर अंदर आपके family में. So these are all indications that you will require a lot of money to spend, and especially after this, you have to have your emergency fund set as soon as possible. Now I'll take you to the steps of how we can do it. First of all, try to keep a separate bank account उसके लिए, कि एक नया बैंक अकाउंट बना दिया, नया लिक्विड फंड में डाल दिया, विच इज इजीली आइडेंटिफाइबल कि कुछ भी प्रॉब्लम हुआ ये लिक्विड फंड को निकालना है, कि ये बैंक अकाउंट में टैप करना है, या फिर ये तिजोरी में मैंने कैश रखा है, ये तभी हाथ लगाएंगे जब भी हमको इमरजेंसी फंड होगा, इमरजेंसी का रिक्वायरमेंट होगा. So you have to categorize them differently and you have to put them separately such that they cannot be used or mixed with your daily expenses or any other form of your expenses or savings. This has to be kept separately. Secondly, the best way to do it is एक mandate रख दो. 5 तारीख को अगर let's say आपका सैलरी आ रहा है, 6 तारीख को इमरजेंसी फंड्स के लिए आपने जितना डिसाइड किया है वैल्यू, उतना आपका ऑटोमेटिकली डेबिट हो जाए आपके अकाउंट से. The remaining can be used for all your expenses and savings. But liquid fund ka mandate has to be a must. Now you can divide your liquid funds into 3 kinds, basically into cash, bank account and liquid fund. And why we do that is because kabhi agar koi emergency aa gaya and you cannot always bank on just keeping everything into liquid funds or a bank के बैंक जब भी बिजनेस डे होगा तभी हम लोग आके निकालेंगे, या अगर लिक्विड फंड है तो 24 आवर्स है आपके पास, so maybe मैं आज नहीं मैं कल देता हूँ. Not all emergencies come with a deadline. There are some emergencies that have to be done right now. So उसके लिए, let's say from your total emergency fund, keep about 10, 15, 20% as cash, about some 30% as in a separate bank account, and rest in the liquid funds. So that your money is secured, it is kept separately, and at the same time, you have access as much as possible and as soon as possible. One very important thing is never ever get greedy कि ये इन्वेस्टमेंट मेरे को 6% दे रहा है, ये इन्वेस्टमेंट मेरे को 6.5% दे रहा है या 60% दे रहा है, सो लेट मी स्विच, लेट मी डू दिस, लेट मी डू दैट. डोंट डू इट. वंस यू हैव फिक्सेटेड कि यहाँ पे मेरा अगर फंड्स जाएगा, सो लेट इट गो देयर. You are not putting this fund aside so that you want to earn more income. This is for your safety. So safety always will come first when you talk about emergency funds. At the same time, you can also take some one-time opportunities. Let's say, for example, you get an income tax refund. Let's say you get some gifts during festivals, your birthdays, that you're not going to use the money. वो सारा funds आप emergency funds में जल्दी से डाल दो so that your fund gets filled in quickly. Now, setting up of emergency fund is not that difficult. But if you still think that it is a complicated thing, get it done by a financial advisor who will act as a coach and keep you away from making mistakes. Now we'll talk about where exactly you can use our emergency funds. So for any expense to qualify as fit to be withdrawn from an emergency fund, it should have the following traits. It should be an important and an unavoidable expense, and it should be an unexpected expense. अगर आप ऐसा सोच रहे हो कि मैं एक हॉलिडे प्लान कर रहा हूँ, उसके लिए एक इमरजेंसी फंड बना दूं, तो हॉलिडे इज नॉट एन इमरजेंसी. यू शुड नॉट डू दैट. So making an emergency fund has to be with a very strong, very strict purpose, and has to be followed in a very disciplined manner. Now, just because you are dipping into your emergency fund because of some very basic expenses, that is okay, because as long as, let's say, there is a car repair, आप एक रोज एक ऑफिस में एक कार में जा रहे हो, आपके बाइक पे जा रहे हो, you need to repair it, थोड़ा खर्चा ज्यादा लग गया, dip into your emergency fund, because that is not something you get daily, that is something unexpected. You can get into it, and you can easily do it. Now, the biggest question, or the most frequent question that we've got, is whether we can start our new business out of the emergency funds. You can maybe use 10-20% of your emergency fund, not more than that, and that also only when you are really stuck and have nowhere else to go. Because if you're using completely all your capital of your of your emergency fund for funding your business, and God forbid if that business doesn't take off well, or it takes too much time to take off, you will be left in a far worse situation than you started. So you really have to analyze what is important, what is unavoidable, what is unexpected, in order to dip into your emergency savings. The more strict and disciplined you are with your emergency funds, the stronger will your safety net be, and you will be less and less afraid with your job losses, your changing career paths, your surprise expenses. And even if you want to take a sabbatical, you will be good to go. I'm open for questions if you have any. Yes. Sorry, there's a glitch regarding the questions I'm getting. I'll just get back to you in a minute. Yes. So the question is it okay to invest my emergency fund in the stock market? It is not okay, because emergency fund is something that you might require anytime, and you don't want to rely on your business, your stock sentiment and the market sentiment कि आपका value बढ़ेगा या कम होगा. So basically, the emergency fund is not meant for you to earn income. It is just for your safety, so that in case there is anything unforeseen happening, so you can stay well and not compromise on your lifestyle. Can I use my emergency fund for non-financial emergencies like medical emergencies or car repairs? Yes, you can. That is exactly why we are making these emergency funds, and you must. In fact, we would encourage you to do that. How can I protect my emergency fund from inflation or loss of value? That's a good question, Gayatri. Normally, see, if you are keeping all of your investment in your cash, so that is when your inflation will affect you the most. But at the same time, if you uh, keep your emergency fund into liquid funds, it will still give you some amount of interest, almost something very close to a FD interest. So it will not be a complete loss of value, but you'll be secure to a certain extent in that case. What types of expenses should I cover with my emergency fund? So, like I said, any expenses you can cover which are unexpected and which are unavoidable and important. So, like for example, car repairs है आपका. Let's say you are out of a job, you want to switch your career paths but not getting another job, and you have left your previous job already. ऐसा कोई situation है, you can get into it, and you can dip into your emergency fund for that. What type of emergencies should my fund cover? All kinds of emergencies, whatever you feel is important, whatever you feel you cannot avoid, and you have to keep it. अगर घर पे leakage है तो है, you have to fix it. You cannot stay in a or in a house which is infested full of leakages or pests or the other problems that will come with it. Sahil is asking, how much money should I aim to have in my emergency fund? The thumb rule is 6 months of your average monthly expenses. पूरे साल का एक एक्सपेंस देख लो, आपका कितना टोटल हुआ है, उसका 6 months का उसके हिसाब से आप निकालो. एवरेज मंथली एक्सपेंस आपका कितना निकला है, and that is the answer to your emergency fund. But of course, if you're having somebody in your family who is already receiving some treatments and you are thinking कि शायद इनको और भी ज़्यादा ज़रूरत पड़ सकता है, you can always aim for more. This topic is very relevant. Thank you for addressing it. Please tell me, should I have separate emergency funds for different types of emergencies? Not really required, Vinita. You don't really have to do separate emergencies because it will just complicate your matter. It will be easy if you just have one umbrella emergency fund के जो भी problems हुआ वो सब इसमें से निकालना है. And if you still feel के आपका कॉर्पस इमरजेंसी फंड का आपने जो जमा किया है that is less, you can always go for more. There is no ceiling for how much emergency fund you can have. How does having insurance like health insurance or car insurance affect my need for an emergency fund? It does affect it. It really does affect Anand. Emergent अगर आपके पास health insurance है and you have a lot of, I mean, most of your ailments covered in that, तो आपका emergency fund का of course necessity कम हो जाएगा, but that you will realize only when you really have to spend on those expenses. Now there will be some times that let's say you have a lot of cover, but ऐसा कोई बीमारी आ गया which is not really covered, or maybe when you have that gestation period when you are buying a new health insurance, तो दे हैव सम जेस्टेशन पीरियड ऑफ लाइक 30 days, 45 days, 60 days के इसके अंदर आपको अगर कुछ हो गया देन इंश्योरेंस कंपनी इज नॉट रियली लाइबल टू पे यू. सो इस टाइप के एक्सपेंसेस के लिए विच प्रोबेबली माइट नॉट बी कवर्ड, और मे बी आपका इंश्योरेंस कवर पूरा होने के बाद भी यू स्टिल हैव टू एक्सपेंड बिकॉज ऑफ योर मेडिसिन, सम एक्सपेंसिव मेडिसिन, इंजेक्शंस, तो उसके लिए आपको ये काम आ सकता है. सो it does give you a, I mean, health insurance, car insurance does give you a safety net, but that does not mean कि आपका emergency funds आप उसकी वजह से कम कर दो. But you can definitely say कि मतलब कि आपको बहुत ज्यादा फिर करने का जरूरत नहीं है because of this. How can I start building my emergency fund if I don't have much money? Uh, there's only two ways of doing it: either increase your income or reduce your expenses. If you don't have much money, जितना है उससे start करो. And in case if you're in that scenario where let's say you're earning maybe 30,000 rupees, but your expenses are somewhere around 27,000 rupees, you don't have much to spare, everything that you save has to go into your emergency fund, because then it becomes critical कि थोड़ा भी कोई और नया expense आएगा तो आपको immediately dip in करना पड़ेगा वो emergency fund में, because otherwise either you'll have to take a loan or you'll have to go to a friend and ask for help. And generally we don't want to be in that situation. So whatever you can save, as much as you can save, try to maximize it and put everything into emergency fund. Don't worry about any of your investments कि उसका क्या होगा, कि इसका वैल्यू का क्या होगा, कि इसमें रिटर्न्स कितना मिलेगा. Everything first has to go to your safety net. Then I have a question, Advait. Can I use my emergency fund for long-term goals like buying a house or going on a vacation? Advait, since you have sent it with the smileys, I understand that this, I mean, I sense something sarcastic, but of course, no, you cannot. Emergency fund has to be short-term in nature. आपको जो house बनाना है या vacation पे जाना है, उसके लिए you can dip into your other buckets and take money out of it. And so the last question I'm having is, should I adjust the size of my emergency fund as I get older or my financial situation changes? Definitely, Aisha, you should change your the size of your emergency fund, because like for example, if you're getting older, you're more prone to diseases. So it's better if you have a bigger emergency fund as compared to when you are younger. Or if your, let's say, financial situation is changing, I'm assuming your lifestyle also is changing, because of which your expenses will change eventually. And again, to cover your expenses, in order for you to stay in that lifestyle for a longer period of time, you should adjust your emergency fund based on that. Alia, please give me some tips on how can one save for an emergency fund while still paying off debt. So emergency fund still has to be side by side even if you're paying off some debt. But what you can rather do is that when you're getting some one-time opportunities like gifts or something, try paying off your debt first, because that is going to be a bigger toll on your finances. Because interest burden will always be more than your earnings in the emergency funds, or maybe any other asset class also that you might go for. So yes, I believe we are done with all the questions. Thank you for attending this, and we'll see you soon.